technology. Okay, so thank you so much, Gully, and that amazing talk about those real-world outcomes. And I think you would have noticed the link, in hapticity engagement that she mentions. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Deidre Brollo, who has a PhD titled Memory Perception and the Art of Seeing Double, which accompanied her exhibition, The Return Room, which was awarded at the University of Sydney in 2007. Deidre sees the book as a repository and site of exchange as well, so again, a common theme, and as an archive in the face of loss. Once again, another link, I think, to Gully and perhaps also to Robin's, or to Gully's concern for the preservation of the voices of Afghan women and how we think about artist books. So Deidre's interests come from her book practice and interest in print culture and the book as a material object. So I'm going to hand over now to Deidre. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry. Okay. So, oh yes.
This will go forward for you.
Okay,
on the
perfect.
slides, and you can see them all there.
That's great, thank you. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Yes.
We're recording everything. If you don't speak in the microphone,
Okay, I'll do my best. Thanks, Tim. So at the centre of my practice is print. So the path I'll take today toward the book will be a little circuitous, but stick with me. I promise I'll get there. While I'm trained as a printmaker, my practice is also equally dependent on the printed record. I'm fundamentally someone who sifts and sorts through the dispersed and fragmentary remnants of print culture, looking to uncover latent narratives and histories. This approach is a generative one, allowing ideas to emerge through a process defined as much by serendipity as productive constraint. The past as it appears in print is elusive and also excessive. Prints overflow, proliferate, disperse and scatter. While this element of my process began as a means to catalyse ideas and gather material evidence, over time this engagement with printed matter has undergone a shift toward a broader interrogation of print culture and its agency in the world. What aspects of our culture are unmarked by printed words, images or artefacts? Through reproduction and distribution, an object becomes a multiple, gaining a collective presence that hardens and legitimises it. In this way, printed matter exerts a form of pressure on the world. Print is often heralded as a benign or benevolent agent, and it is indeed with a tender touch that it records our birth and shapes our earliest lessons. But it also insinuates itself into our ethics and our politics, at times persuasive and cajoling, at other times belligerent and off-putting. Impressed onto printed maps, the boundaries of our suburbs and cities become calcified through repetition, while national borders open or close in response to a printed passport. And when it assumes legal or carceral forms, the form of violence exerted by print is equal to the weight of its role as proof, sanction, or witness. To think metaphorically for a moment, we can see how printed matter leaves its impression on the softness of our form, the receptive surface of our mind, and on our malleable culture. Whether gentle or violent, this pressure, what we might think of as cause, leaves an impression or effect. Print shapes how we see the world, how we think and behave, and indeed how we remember. So through my process of sifting and sorting this printed matter, I've steadily come to an awareness of the agency of print. My gaze is met with its force. I feel it pressing when I look at it. But the question always then is what to make of this printed matter. How might I find a way to press back against it? This question of agency underlies my engagement with the book form. We don't have a specific word to denote a person as they engage with an artist's book. What shall we call them? A viewer or reader, a spectator, a performer? But this encounter can encompass holding and feeling as much as looking and reading. The beholder, for want of a better word, might pause or rush the flow of time, just as they might create or destroy the work inadvertently or even by design. So in working with the book form, I'm aware of a shift, a movement or leakage from the print toward the beholder. This transference opens up the possibility that touch might be met with touch at this site of encounter. Within my practice then, the artist's book is a tool to initiate novel ways to engage with the printed record in the hope that we might more closely scrutinise print, its operations and effects. I'll now discuss the artist's book Unsettled from 2022. The work consists of a stone veneer-covered cylinder box, which holds a collection of 8 dossiers, each with a screen-printed map cover. Inside each dossier is a title page with laser-cut coordinates, followed by a long list of place names which proceed index-like across its many pages. The closing page bears an image of a tool printed, like all the text, through archival pigment printing. Unsettled began with looking closely through the printed evidence of settlement. I'd been thinking about the map as a printed object and the centrality of its role within the colonial project as a tool to shape, control and settle zones of upheaval. Sifting and sorting through maps, atlases and databases, I gathered thousands of place names that seemed meaningful or charged from across Australia. Each place name had, at some moment in time, been brought into being through an individual act of imagination or memory. It had been spoken, perhaps written, and had taken on the currency of use. At some point, though, the name was set into a matrix, pressed onto paper or cloth, and reproduced. Through this process, it was dispersed and took root, outgrowing and displacing other names for this place. While some of these place names might appear banal, curious, or even bizarre when viewed in isolation. Sorry, my clicker's not working there. I was struck by the way in which these individual acts of place naming left an impression of struggle, bewilderment, emotion, opportunity, and failure on the map. And when gathered together in their thousands, these names began to swell and coalesce around particular themes: extraction, violence, punishment, occupation, which began to elicit uncomfortable narratives that spoke not just of individual events, but of systematic ways of being, thinking, and acting. For me, one of the most compelling parts of making this book was the realisation that many place names referenced or implied the use of particular tools and weapons. Each dossier then had been bookended by a related implement: chains, pickaxe, hammer, saw, sextant, hatchet, shovel, and trap. Tools to shape a country, weapons to take a territory. Unsettled proposes another one: the map itself as a tool of control, landforming, and occupation, as anything carved from timber or forged from steel. If we return to the structure of the work, we can see how the form of the book proposes and unsettles this notion. Each map is isolated from the place names, peeled apart to form the cover and interior of each dossier. Each turn of the page further distances topography from toponymy. These places become untethered, and a map bereft of places, known, named, owned places, becomes a blunt instrument indeed. But neither can we be guided by the map alone. We cannot trust its elevation and folds to orient us, or chart a course by its contours. In preparing these images for screen printing, I sought to deliberately and systematically introduce error, distorting the maps through the use of an exaggerated halftone dot and deliberately printing their colours just slightly off register. Through their translation into screen prints then, these maps have become visually unstable. They draw us closer in an effort to render detail, then repel us as the map dissolves into noise. They allow no comfortable point of viewing, but rather leave us adrift and disoriented. Cartographic and toponymic practices don't just record a landscape, they work to form and shape it, and the printed map adds legitimacy and weight to this. In this work, the form of the book becomes a means to push back against this, to unsettle and disorganise a settled view of place. I'll now discuss a work from 2017, the installation called Timekeeper, a title which oscillates between ideas of duration or passing of time and stasis, or the attempt to hold and keep time still. This work is preoccupied with the notion of the archive and contemplates the twin anxieties of preservation and loss. While the book, in one of its many forms, has been viewed as a repository for knowledge and memory, the arrival of the printing press brought with it further insurance against loss. In what might be called the consolations of the multiple, reproduction provided us with safety in numbers. As this duty of remembering is delegated to prints, books, museums, and now server farms and clouds, the anxieties of loss begin to ease. Meanwhile, the anxieties of preservation grow as we search for ever larger archives in which to shelter this burgeoning material. This project was shaped by the knowledge of two particular forms of disappearance, one historical, one contemporary. The first was the vast and disquieting history of book loss and destruction through either deliberate action or misadventure. The second was the threat that a Trump presidency would initiate the deletion of vast swathes of scientific data stored online. Activists, scientists and librarians mobilised to engage what becomes known as data rescue, duplicating information onto servers located in safe countries. The threat proved very real indeed, and while some information was saved, we'll never know how much was lost. The archive itself was in need of refuge. Timekeeper was conceived as a space which was simultaneously austere, bureaucratic and reverent. At the centre of the work was an archive station, an ambiguous piece of furniture which performs the functions of library cabinet and administrative desk, and what I conceive of as 3 artist books. The first of these, sitting within the cabinet, is a card catalogue which indexes 1,000 lost books from history, including Anaximenes' On Nature from the 6th century BCE, which is the first known theory of evolution, now gone, as well as the first known theory of atoms from Democritus in the 5th century BCE. These lost books exist within a kind of liminal space or bardo. While lost, their disappearance is not total though. We know of their previous existence only through references in other books. This index evokes these spectral books within the space, but they also alert us to a larger, more unknowable void that sits just out of sight. What of all the other unrecorded losses? The second book, the most conventional of the 3, is a Coptic-bound, wood-covered volume placed opposite the archive station. This large book rests open on a lectern in a quasi-ecclesiastical posture. This book too exists within a state of uncertainty. Glowing with light from above, its pages bear images from historical volumes which appear unfixed, as though caught in a moment of transformation, either emerging or disappearing from the page. The third artist book is formed progressively within the archive station itself. Though perpetually unattended, the desk holds a stack of cards and a pencil. On close inspection, these cards are an administrative conceit which requests that the visitor report their own loss on the form and deposit it in the nearby chute. Throughout the duration of the exhibition, this action was performed hundreds of times. As visitors summoned their private loss into the space, they also evoked the emotional charge of its absence. All of these losses, whether small or profound, were brought into relation with the vast history of loss catalogued within the index cards. As each loss passed through the brass lip of the chute and fell away into the void, it formed part of a growing but ultimately unknowable book of loss. The archive station performed the duties we expect of our implements of preservation, to hold what is vulnerable and to keep them safe in perpetuity. But the cumulative book, compiling itself deep within its belly, stirred other thoughts, as each card fed the archive's appetite for loss. While the archive itself offers protection, the archive's value is constituted by the broader destruction of the thing it preserves. To put it in another way, the archive is at once protective and predatory. Through its haptic material and performative possibilities, the artist book can initiate a site of encounter, a point of contact and exchange with our restless history. It returns some agency to the artist and to the beholder, allowing us to scrutinise and perhaps reconfigure the terms on which we engage with the past. Thank you.
now I'd like to introduce you all to Jan Davis.